Good evening. Well, look, where the government proposes to take small steps in the right direction, we will support them to do that. But I must say, taken as a whole, these measures go nowhere near far enough to combat the borders crisis this Labour government is presiding over. Illegal channel crossings have surged since the general election. The numbers in asylum hotels have gone up since the election, and the first year under Labour saw the highest number of asylum claims in history. So while some of these measures are little steps in the right direction, and we'll support those, it's not enough. We need to come out of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, which will enable the government to deport all illegal immigrants within a week of arriving. That will act as a very rapid deterrent because people won't bother coming in the first place if they know they're going to get quickly removed.
Where would you move these asylum seekers to in the space of a week?
Well, first of all, to their country of origin, if that is safe or possible, and there wouldn't be any court process at all, which will speed things up a great deal and stop various vexatious human rights or modern slavery-based claims. In limited cases, it won't be possible or safe to return to the country of origin, in which case you would use a safe third country, like, for example, Rwanda. But I would make this very important point.
That was a roaring success, wasn't it? 700 million quids and one asylum seeker, I think.
Well, as you know, the Rwanda scheme never actually commenced. It was due to start just after the general election. But Keir Starmer's fault, because when he got elected Prime Minister on July the 4th of last year, he cancelled the Rwanda scheme about 3 weeks before the first flight was due to take off. He had no replacement plan, and as a consequence, channel crossings have surged. The point I was about to make a second ago is that you only need to remove people, all people who arrive illegally, for 2 or 3 or maybe 4 months before the deterrent effects means they stop attempting the crossing in the first place, because why would you cross if you're simply going to get removed? The Australians did something very similar about 13 years ago. They called it Operation Sovereign Borders, and when I spoke to Tony Abbott, the former Australian Prime Minister, about this a few weeks ago, he explained to me that within about 3 or 4 months of them starting that scheme, I think it was in September 2013, the illegal crossings they were experiencing from Indonesia to Australia completely
Chris,
stopped.
First of all, come on, we're not Australia. You can't just map what happened in Australia onto the UK, for example. But the question here is, why would anyone sat at home think, oh, well, let's trust the Conservative Party again? They have got a plan. I mean, you were in power for years and these numbers surged. You're the people who started using hotels to house asylum seekers. You caused this mess largely, didn't you?
Well, on your first point, the principle of a removals deterrent applies whether it's Australia or the UK. It's the principle I'm talking about. Secondly, as far as the last government is concerned, in the last full year in office, 2023, channel crossings actually went down by about a third. And in the Conservative governments, the previous government's last year in office, the use of hotels roughly halved. But we are under new leadership. Kemi Badenoch was never Prime Minister before. I was never Home Secretary. And under new leadership, we have a new plan, which we set out at our party conference. And that includes completely pulling out of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, which will enable us to make sure all illegal immigrants get removed within a week of arrival. So a new leadership and a new plan, because we can see Labour is completely failing and a new approach is needed.
Illegal immigrants are not going to be deported within a week of you taking power or a week of you enacting a plan. I mean, you've gone through some of the obstacles. You haven't gone through the obstacle of countries maybe saying, well, no, we're not going to take them. It's not going to be solved in a week. Isn't this the problem with this issue, is that politicians like yourself keep claiming you're going to do stuff, keep giving the impression it's going to be relatively easy, fail, and you make people more angry?
Well, the reason that it's difficult to do, was in the past, and today it is still difficult to deal with these issues, is the whole legal architecture, which includes the ECHR that I've talked about already. It also includes modern slavery legislation that gets invoked. It involves the endless appeals that happen in the court system. So you need to basically dismantle all of that. And that is why the last government, frankly, struggled, and it's why the current Labour government is struggling as well, because you've got this entire legal architecture that makes it essentially impossible to police our borders. And that's why all of that legal architecture needs to be completely swept away. Now, you asked a practical question about countries taking back their own citizens. Now, we take back our own citizens if they are due to be returned here from some other country around the world. Other countries should, and by and large do the same. Interestingly, the current government, have just used powers that we legislated about 2 or 3 years ago to say that if a country does not accept back its own citizens, we will use visa sanctions. That's where we say, well, if you're not going to take your own people back, then we're not going to issue any more visas to your citizens that want to come to the UK, whether that's for work, for study, for holiday, whatever it may be. And now the USA, the Donald Trump administration, did something quite similar. And in the last 6 or 9 months, they've had a lot of success in making sure that recalcitrant
and we don't know
nations have accepted
be...
back their own citizens, which is a reasonable thing to require them to do. We do the same in reverse.
But Chris, I mean, to say you're over-promising, anyway, we shall see. On these current proposals, are you guys going to back the government on this? You're going to vote this through? You're going to give them the votes?
Yeah, look, where they're proposing things that make sense, for example, the making asylum grants for legal migrants temporary, yeah, we'll support that because it's a sensible step in the right direction. But I would just stress the point again, it is only a tiny step in the right direction, and these proposals, I mean, talking about, not delivering, these proposals ultimately are not going to deliver because they're not radical enough. They don't address things like the ECHR and the court system, but where there are little tiny steps in the right direction, sure, we'll support those.
OK, Chris Philp, live for us there inside Parliament. The Shadow Home Secretary, thank you very much indeed.